Hello, welcome everybody. We're so pleased to have you here for Tina Cupell'aq's presentation. She's going to be sharing with you a selection of cultural belongings and artifacts, the Sheldon Jackson Museum Permanent Collection. And she's part of the Alaska Native Artist Residency Program. We have an audience here in the museum and then also all of you on Zoom. So we'll be moving back and forth between both groups. And before we begin, I just want to read a land acknowledgement for the Friends of Sheldon Jackson Museum and make a few brief announcements and share a bit about Tina. So welcome to the event. I would like to acknowledge and express our appreciation to the Indigenous people of Tlingit who have occupied this land for longer than any of us can imagine. And after 250 years of colonization in Alaska, are graciously allowing us to share this land with them. Thank you so much. Tina comes to us from Anchorage, where she works as an ICU nurse, but she's also a very talented beater, as you can see from the examples of her jewelry here on the table. If you have had an opportunity to attend her presentation in the past or her beading class, you know that she's an absolute delight to have here at the museum. We're so fortunate to work with her. And she learned to bead from her aunt when she was just 6 years old. She's been beading ever since, and she's continued especially to have interest in working with youth, which she's done in Bethel, and in a variety of other ways, which she can share more with you about later on her own. So with that being said, she does leave us. Her last day is October 2nd, so pretty soon her residency will wrap up. She's been here about 3 weeks. Our next artist is coming soon, Denali McGlashan. She arrives just 2 days after Tina leaves, and she's a very talented watercolor artist who is Unangan and is currently based in Australia, and will be joining us for 3 weeks. So please come to some of her presentations and talks and classes if you can, and I'd love to turn it over to Tina.
All right, next slide. Let me see. Hello, everybody. My name is Tina. My Yupik name is Cupell'aq. I grew up in Bethel, which is 400 miles west of Anchorage for those of you who don't know. But I grew up between there and just south of California, or LA in California, Southern California, where my dad was at. So I had a really nice mix of shockingly different cultures there. Primarily I was in Bethel though, so then kind of vacationed and summered in Southern California, which my dad always thought was backwards because it was like 100 degrees there in the summertime, and maybe I should be up in Alaska. So this presentation here is just going to go over like some of my reflections on some of the pieces that I was able to see in the back collections. So not just what I was able to walk around and look at out there, which are amazing. The collections here in such a small space, it's incredible. But also looking through kind of the backlog. Who here is from Sitka or lives here? Did you know that you can come book some time and come and look at the pieces back there? Yeah. So I was told, like that was a beautiful piece of information that I learned is that, locals or anybody can kind of call and book some time and come and look at the collections that are back there, and they're not out, for the public to see. And what's beautiful is if you're from the area, you get this really up close and personal view of the artifacts that are there. You don't have that glass between you. And so you can feel them and you can smell them. And it's just like a very beautiful experience. So I highly recommend that for whoever's here. All right, now let's move into here. So the first slide, you guys see that slide? Looking back to look forward. So my big thing as an artist and as an Indigenous artist, but also coming from mixed backgrounds, is I love looking back at bold patterns, design, and what I grew up surrounded by with my grandmother doing skin sewing and knitting and everything. And then all of the regalia that we continued to use as I was growing up. Like in second grade, I wore biluruks to school. So muklaks, for those of you who don't know. So, and they, I had to shove newspapers in there because my grandmother made them for me, and she made them as a size 8 women's. And I was in second grade. So my mom shoved newspaper in and then she put them on. And I remember going to school and wearing them and being out and then coming in and they were all wet, but who cares? And then going back out. I mean, you know, just growing up with the regalia still being used. And so with that said, what I found looking through the collections, and I let Jackie know this, is looking at the stuff, I guess I just took it for granted as a kid. And I just thought maybe I was gonna learn everything there was to know about it by osmosis because it was around me. I didn't ask those questions when I was growing up, and nobody was teaching me like right offhand. It was just surrounding me. And so going and looking at the collections, it was this harsh kind of like slap in the face for myself that I need to know more about the background and the history of each piece and why like certain numerology is being used on patterns and all that. So with that being said, let me see. We'll go into the next one. Okay. Okay. So patterns, placement, and design. You know, when I was here, I didn't know the number and the counting on certain regalia, but the 5 pieces. So if you're looking at a piece and it has 5 pieces, it represents the digits. I didn't know this, and I learned it while I was here, and I think that's a beautiful thing. And then when you have the 4 counts, you know, it's representing the 4 directions. I knew that Yuyuhak, like the circle with the 4 markings coming off of it, were kind of the elements, and then also just like a universal what would it be, like one with the earth, like your spirit is connected to the universe and the 4 directions there. But looking at the patterns with regards to my art that I do is I like to look at the design and incorporate it into my beadwork and into some of the paintings that I do as well. And so I'll just hold up a couple, and hopefully it's okay for the people who are Zooming too. So for instance, this bead pattern would be a Dumakjak pattern, or what I call it is Dumakjak. And up north, they call it Gupak. And you would find that, let me see, you would find that on some of the fur regalia that everybody would use. Does this look familiar? Like this kind of pattern? Have you seen it in the museum and kind of on the like on the cuffs or the outlines of the parkas or the muklaks? So I like to try and incorporate that in, but give it a little bit of a modern twist there. So I think you saw that as well. The other thing that kind of shocked me in looking at the stuff back there is we would open up a drawer and there would be like 15 or 20 baskets. And then all of a sudden I would zone in and look at one basket and be like, I want to know more information about this basket. And Jackie would go look and she'd say, that's from the Kuskokwim region. And this happened more than once, you know, and so that kind of made me aware that a lot of what's inside me and what triggers me and draws me in it's from where I'm from. I don't know if that makes sense. You know, it's innate in me. So I didn't know this basket that you're looking at here, that is very old. Like that is not a pattern that I grew up seeing, you know, in the household. It was more so that pattern at the bottom there. So this pattern is very, very old. And I actually thought that maybe it was more like a Inupiaq, like northern design. But then in grabbing the card, found out it was from the Kuskokwim region. So that was exciting. That was exciting for me to find out. And then also just know kind of innately how I felt about certain patterns or designs. Looking at this work, so I have learned how to basket weave. It is really hard. It is really challenging. I talked one of my great aunts into teaching me. It took over a year for her to agree to teach me. And and this is like in my early 20s. And she said, okay, come to my house on Saturday at 7 in the morning and I'll teach you. And I think she thought I wasn't going to show up, but I did. And so she taught me how. And looking at the craftsmanship, I mean, that bottom left corner, that's that really old piece. So, you know, there's some wear and tear there. But looking above that and just the the quality of work and the craftsmanship that went into this basket weaving, having learned it and done it before, I'm looking at these pieces and I'm like just in awe over the skill that took place. So going back to that Cupell'aq pattern, so looking at the really old patterns in there, you know, they were very, very creative with the design. And it wasn't that it was one pattern that spoke for all of like the Yupik people or all the Inupiaq people or anything. So each one is just so intricate, especially that one on the right that you're looking. I kind of was able to lift it up and look at the back side of the stitch work, and it looked overwhelming. But I grew up with my grandmother having been a master skin sewer, and she made each one of her daughters and sons a fancy parka. So each parka had a very unique Cupell'aq pattern at the base. Traditionally, what I was told by my aunt is long time ago, that Cupell'aq pattern would represent the family that you came from. So they would do the same pattern for everybody in that family. But my grandma didn't. She made everybody's really unique. But there's a new skin sewer, a modern skin sewer, he's in his 20s, fantastic skin sewer, Golga. And he was actually an artist in residence here this time last year, October last year. And I was talking with him about it, the Cupell'aq patterns, because his are really fun. And he does like stars and he'll do really fun patterns. And he said to me, even though Elena, my grandma, did different patterns for all her kids, he can recognize her patterns out and about. So when he sees work, he knows it's done by her, which I thought was really fascinating because he pays attention to that stuff. You know, skin sewing is his expertise. So hearing that from him really meant a lot to me, because I was kind of thinking, oh, Graham, like, how come you didn't just do all of ours so we could all just look the same? Nope, she was creative. So she did all, but it was really fun to hear him talk about that aspect that, oh, I could tell Elena Nick's work from a mile away, you know. So going in the gallery here, you know, some of this stuff, I think all these, except for that top left image, these are in the gallery and on display in there. And just, again, the craftsmanship and the design and the patterns that you see it's incredible. I tend to get drawn to the work of Yupik people. It's what I grew up with. It's kind of what, you know, brings me joy in learning. And then also at some point in my artist career, I'd like to replicate or work on skin sewing to make my daughters, you know, some regalia as well. So most of what you're going to see here is of Yupik, from the Yupik territory. That bottom left there, that was very inspiring. So this is a seal gut pullover parka. But just the patterns that I saw in there, the inlay patterns, I don't have anything now, but you better believe I'm gonna kind of utilize that in like future jewelry. I also got some time to spend with some of the bent wood and carved wood bowls back there. And again, going back there, you pull this drawer out and you can smell the wood. You can smell, like one of them, I kind of leaned in and I was like, man, I can smell like some seal oil in there. Like you can smell what they put in these containers, and then also the wood, and then maybe the dyes that they used to create them. But all these little images in the middle, you know, in the middle of the bowls, the little animals, the representation, it's all just, this is what drew my attention, and the photographs that I took for then future use with like pattern design in jewelry and everything. The masks and the paintings and the wood carving. I also carve. I haven't in a long time, but I learned from Alvin Amison. He keeps, every time I run into him, he keeps telling me to come by the studio and come carve with him, but I haven't made it over. I need to do that. So looking at these masks was really a powerful experience as well. and just kind of looking at the coloring and where they placed kind of the design and the patterns. Like the one in the middle there, you know, you'd think it was kind of a replica of tattoo work back in the day. But again, I don't know a lot of factual knowledge or stories within like the masks and the carvings and the use. But it'll be something that I'll study in the future. So I did put an image there of a piece that I've done. So on the right there, and then on the left, that headdress you can find in the museum over there. So we call that design, or that necklace, is a uyamic necklace. They're traditionally used for like Eskimo dance, or just kind of like adorning for regalia. You'd have a couple necklaces on of all this beadwork. And it was really beautiful to see the really old style, the old patterns in the headdress, and that same kind of, I guess, well, bead pattern technique used. So again, just kind of moving forward, looking at what was used back in the day, and then kind of moving it and utilizing it in modern art and modern beading. I did spend some time in my early 20s when I was living in Bethel making really bright neon uyamic necklaces and selling them at YKHC, which is the hospital, as like lanyards. And I thought I was being so innovative. I was like, oh man, look at these really cool old necklaces, but then we're gonna do them with like lime green and like hot pink and, you know, bright orange. And so I'm like, I don't know if there's some rolling around now, but I did a handful of those for sure. So working forward from what we learn, this is all my work here. So again, masks are always kind of like on my mind as far as things that I gravitate towards. This one is a painting watercolor on Yupo paper, so plastic paper. But I had a really fun time developing it. I'm working on the second one. I call this mask one of a series of self-portraits. So each mask that I do kind of represents, you know, how I'm feeling at the time and what I want to incorporate in there. And again, it's taking me years. I don't know if you guys are artists or know of artists, but sometimes we have projects that we set aside and we take it out a year later and work on it and then set it aside and do, you know. And so this has been like a really long process of working on my like self-portrait series. And then those two earrings there in the front right one, left one, that has the fish leather. So the dyed fish leather in the middle of the circles. And that one is a hugger earring. So that one hugs your earlobe. So it goes in, the post goes in the front, and all the dangles hang off the back side of your earlobe. And I got my inspiration for that from salmon berries and poppies. Love me some poppies. They're beautiful. And salmon berries are always my favorite. So this has been a really beautiful experience, being able to come here and look at all the work and being able to photograph and touch and again, smell all the seal oil bowls of the work that is in the back there, and then move forward and be able to kind of incorporate it in like a contemporary native modern art movement. So my thing with my art is I love to utilize our traditional stuff, but I like to create things that speak to more than just, let's say, Yup'ik. So let's say Yup'ik, you know, I gravitate to what's traditionally what I see and I want to wear it, but that might not be for everybody. So I like to create things that, you know, somebody else from Texas can come up and they're like, ooh, this is really nice, you know, and just kind of make something a little more global as far as what the eye appreciates. But then always throwing in kind of an homage to my traditional regalia or the traditional patterns used. Questions? Yeah.
This picture. Okay, the earrings that are black and white.
Uh-huh.
How do those look onto your ear? Because
So
there's a little loop at the top. But...
yeah. So those ones are gonna also be the hugger. Okay. So you know, the post that I'm making for the Cupell'aq series of this kind is gonna have ivory cabs. So I'll have ivory and then beadwork on the outside, which will go in the hole here, and then those ones will hang off the backside.
Maybe interchange with other.
Yeah, you can probably put hooks on those and just wear them that way too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yeah,
What did the diamond represent?
which ones?
Like in the middle here.
Oh, in the middle pair. So that would just be like a Cupell'aq. So let's say, let's look back on. So do you see in even really long time ago, they used that diamond pattern on the Cupell'aq of atguks and biluhuks. I feel like my grandmother utilized it a lot. So this tattoo was done traditional. So it's all hand poke, and then the lines up here are stitches. And this is the pattern that my grandmother used on the last pair of muklaks that she made before she stopped skin sewing.
Such a pleasant design.
Yeah.
Um,
And everybody loves it. You know, everybody is drawn to it. So like I said, I love making pieces that just catch everybody's eye, catches everybody's attention. Somebody actually had come up to me the first week that I was here and was saying when she traveled to Africa, she saw a lot of these very similar kind of geometric patterns, and then the use of black, white, and red. So we use those same three colors. And so she was like, it's kind of everywhere, you know, it speaks to a lot of people. It was like a powerful combination of colors.
Yeah, I wondered about your mask
Uh-huh.
piece. You said that's a drawing, painting?
Yeah.
It's amazing. I'm wondering on the like beads,
Mhm.
are those 3D beads or are those painted?
No, those are 3D.
That's so
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. So each print that I do of this, and I do it on canvas, each one will have its own beadwork that comes off. So that'll be the kind of the unique
That's very cool.
between each one.
I was like honing in on it. Are those each painted? Actually, it's fun.
That would be, I would be impressed with myself if I did that.
I was very proud of it. You said it was a painting. I was like, oh, I thought that was a real carving. That's really cool.
The painting of the mask taken from the real mask, that this is just your vision.
Yeah,
Do you think that you'll go forward and actually carve
yeah,
at some point?
yes.
Yeah.
I also would love to bead this mask. So I have a vision to make a very large scale, you know, kind of solid beaded version of it, not inlay, like just beads, you know, so it would all be bead woven together. So, yeah. Yeah.
I just want to mention, if people go on to the Friends of Sheldon Jackson Museum Instagram page, you can see a beautiful beaded landscape that team created out of beads. How many beads was that?
14,000 beads.
14,000
Yeah.
beads.
And it was an image of Denali that had a Cupell'aq pattern across the bottom. And then the kind of the Yupik symbol at the top. And I did it for the Mary Peltola campaign like years ago. So
How long did that take you?
The Friends
like
of Sheldon
52
Jackson
hours, I
Museum
think,
program.
roughly.
Curious about some of the, like the artistic design on the left. Do you plan out each color and then kind of map it out where you go, or is it a little more free form where you start?
That one's a little free form. I feel like maybe 20 different bead colors in front of me, and I know roughly that I want to like transition from, you know, the salmonberry colors to the blue to the at like around that number, give or take. But then the placement is not identical. So each one of those ones would be unique.
How long did it take you to do with one of those? Symbols?
In the middle,
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't timed myself doing that. I spend time, like I'll sit down and I'll spend time bending the wire. So I'll have like a few hours of just bending that wire that you see at the top. And then once that's done, you know, I'll spend time making the top of it. So I start by making that top, and then I have a really long thread off there, but I'll make a bunch of the top ones because I'm kind of in that rhythm. And then once that's done, I'll bring those over and then I'll work on the fringe because then I'll get in the fringe rhythm. And yeah, so it turns into this like little assembly line of Tina.
So as well as the colors, your perception of how that is, do you also do the design that's in your head first, or is it?
For the beaded earrings?
Yeah,
You know, I graph it out. So I have a little book. And when I teach classes, I like to teach kind of a start to finish model on how to bead earrings, I guess. And I provide one of these little graph books in the class. But often I'll make the pattern first and then have it that way. If, you know, I'm looking back and I've changed designs, I can always come back and not have to just rely on my memory for the count. Or if I had, you know, in the past, I've sold some earrings and I'm like, oh man, I forgot to, you know, draw out that pattern. So I have kind of everything, you know, in here, like a little bead book journal. So
Your residency is coming to an end here, just curious, like, what's next for you? You have
Oh.
new trips or residencies coming up?
yeah, well, I have AFN, so I'm stocking up for that market. And then I just got a contract with Stanford University, so I'll go down in November and teach a 2-day bead workshop with the students in Stanford. During they have like a bunch of programs or things for them for Native American Heritage Month in November. And so we were talking and they were like, hey, what are you doing in November? And I was like, I have this week free. So I'm gonna head down there. So that's exciting.
You mentioned daughters, do any of them bead?
They both bead. Yeah, they both bead. Not like actively right now. They're being busy being 18-year-olds, but but they both know. So that way, if they ever needed just some kind of like creative therapy, they have it. Mm-hmm.
they twins?
So one is biological and one is adopted. Yeah. So I've had my niece, she's my niece from a distant cousin, but I had her since she was 12. So, and she's 18 and moved out and doing amazing.
Just curious if you work with some other materials like the Italian shells or some of the more
Mhm.
traditional materials in your beading as well, or you?
I haven't. Yeah, I haven't. I've done a little bit with porcupine quills, but not a ton. I didn't really grow up with dentalium shells too common. And so like I don't really know, I feel like that's more of like a coastal Yupik design or pattern. And so I kind of feel a little weird working, like I'd feel a little weird working with it because I feel like it's not like Kuskokwim River stuff. So yeah, I'm sure they used it in trade, you know, as like a trade bead kind of thing, but yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned to feed as well as eat as well as carve.
Yeah.
Tell me a little more about. Are they, a lot of people identify it as one and have an entire career of really becoming a master in that.
Yeah.
What is it like to kind of do more than one and feel different and do it?
Well, and then it's like, that is a good question. Cause then I've kind of like, thought this out myself where, I think I'm more like beading is definitely more of my mastery, like cause I've been doing it the longest, and I do it the most consistent. But it is kind of fun to be like a jack of all trades and master of not just one. So yeah. I kind of get a little bit, I'm like a little ADHD in my brain where I'll get like tired of doing something and I'll want to like shift to something else. You know, when I learned ceramics, that's all I wanted to do was just get my hands dirty in clay. When I was carving, it was like as much as possible the time I spent in like the studio doing that. And then painting as well. But like all those other ones require space, right? Carving, you need space, you need to be able to get dirty. You have to have like really good tools, and then ceramics as well. and then painting, and I haven't had a lot of space, and I think that's why I've gravitated towards beading, because it's so accessible. I could just pop it out on the airplane on the way here. Yeah. So, yeah.
So you have the mixed media with the painting and the beading here. Do you have any other projects that combine some of those skills together?
Wait, like here?
Or
I mean, I don't know. I just kind of dabble. I guess I don't understand the question.
so you said you carve and you weave
Yeah.
and you do all these things.
Yeah.
But here it's strictly you. Do
Here-
you have any projects that combine the carving and weaving?
Oh, well, I mean, in the future, that's my goal. We just this year actually bought another property that came with the 840 square foot shop. Super excited. So we're kind of finishing up with renovations of the house, and then we're gonna work on setting up the shop for both of our big activities. So I think wood carving is gonna be my next thing that I'm kind of getting into. I also just don't really like to sit that often, so I did bring this out, so this table kind of extends up and down so that I can stand and bead and stuff, but it would be nice to do a craft where I'm like really moving and getting into it, so. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, thanks for coming out and thanks for listening.